Okay, everyone, welcome to the July 28th meeting of the Economic Development Committee. I'm calling the meeting to order. We have a quorum. First, can someone make a motion with respect to the governor's order?
I will move to suspend the rules to allow us to meet in remotely in accordance with the governor's executive order.
Second.
Do we have to call the roll on that?
Yeah, yes, you do.
Thank you. I'll start virtually. Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
And Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Make sure there isn't anybody else. All right. Member Deacon.
Here.
Member Lindwall.
Here.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
And Councilmember Rizzo.
Aye.
Okay. So we're going to move forward with the second item on our agenda, which is approval of the meeting minutes. We have the EDC draft minutes of June 23rd, 2021. Someone move approval? I'll move approval.
And I will second.
Paul, would you call the roll, please?
I will do so. Councilmember Rizzo.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Member Lindwall.
Aye.
Member Deacon.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. I just want to say this evening that we do have several members of the committee who have other commitments, so we do want to stay succinct because we're going to lose a quorum at some point. So the first item for consideration, and this is this is not discussion, this is consideration, is the Main Street and Howard Street Retail and Food Establishment Pandemic Road Construction Emergency Grants. You know what we don't have here, Paul, is public comment. Oh, okay.
Right.
So, shall we have public comment on this? If we'd like to have public comment?
Are there any members? Well, we'll do the two individuals on hand, and then we'll invite the virtual members
Okay.
or public comment.
For public comment.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Young, would you like to speak?
Yeah. My name is Eric Young, here on behalf of Princeton Restaurant and quite a few other businesses on Main Street. And I just want to thank you in advance for considering the emergency grant. We know that construction is necessary. We know that line lines and infrastructure is necessary. It's just a necessary evil. But coming on the heels of the pandemic, this once in a 100-year pandemic, it has been truly detrimental. So.
Can you speak from here?
Oh, sure. Should I look at that?
No, you can stand right now.
Okay.
On this screen.
No. It's been really detrimental to our businesses. We're trying to rebuild, and we find ourselves struggling like we were when the pandemic hit. So I just want to say thank you in advance for hearing us. That's it.
Hi, I'm Diana Hammond from the Wine Goddess.
We're trying our best. No, you don't have to
Okay.
do that camera.
This is what I look like today, but maybe I'll just stand.
focus on this.
Oh, there you go, perfect. Okay, so I thought it might be helpful to actually share some numbers with you, just so it's not just nebulous, we're not doing so hot. For us, it's been, since the construction started on June 14th, it's literally been like a faucet has been turned off. And I ran some numbers which I shared with the mayor and some other council members. And just if you take May 14th to June 13th, 2020, and then May 14th, the day construction started, 2021, to June to July, the same month, year over year, we're down $21,000. And that was during the pandemic, and that was when we weren't even open for in-person shopping. We were doing everything via phone. Finally, we got our acts together and put stuff online, and we were, loading packages on a cart for people. So you might say to yourself, well, that was during the pandemic and everybody was kind of drinking like fish because there wasn't a whole lot of other things to do. And so I ran the numbers May 14th to June 13th of this year, and then June 14th to July 13th of this year. And we're down very close to $20,000. And June usually is a big month for us, especially, you know, with outdoor dining scenario. And one thing that I wanted to, I should say June is usually a whole lot better than May. But one thing that I wanted to say, you know, about what you said, Eric, was we were planning on having this big kind of, you know, come back, get our mojo back style of a summer. And we were, the one thing, you know, you can't, construction is construction, it needs to happen, this, you know, 100-year project, though I would argue, couldn't it have been a 105-year project coming off the heels of a 100-year pandemic, but that's a moot point at this point. But the one thing that I will say is we were told that our little section of the Custer Oasis was not going to be touched, and that was absolutely not true. It was very much touched. There was a fire hydrant in Eric's section for 22 days, and we had to kind of like put shrubbery around it, and you know, the dust has been just really intense. So I ran the numbers of just what I paid for this year, not last year when I bought chairs and tables and stuff like that, because last year was last year, in just what I bought for the Oasis on the promise that it wouldn't be touched this year. I'm at $6,300 in things that I am literally going to have to put onto eBay. So yeah, that's it. It's a very real financial situation for us. I've had to fire half my staff in the form of the gals who worked for me outside for the Custer Oasis, because we have indeed shut that section down. That broke my heart. They're great people. They're Evanstonians, all of them. So I guess that, yeah, we're really hurting on Main Street. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, who is signed up online, or who we have on the call?
We didn't have the technology for that today, so.
Do we have someone, any public speakers on the call virtually? If you would like to speak, could you raise your hand?
Annie, are you going to speak about the Main Street and Howard Street business support?
Oh, okay, all right, Ed.
I'm assuming that's Ms. Payton, but Tina, would you like to speak about the Main Street or Howard, or Ms. White? Doesn't sound like
Okay. Okay, so Paul, would you like to?
I will kick
Yeah,
off.
it is me, thank you. I didn't really read the agenda, I just signed on, so I just hope that when they're doing Main Street, I'm not sure, are they going, how far down Howard Street are they going? From where to where?
I'm about to present that.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
All right, I just wanted to make sure that they're considerate about the business and property owners over there. When they did the Howard Street project before, they were very professional and obnoxious with workers. And they put a porta potty on my lawn. They had pipes on my lawn, signs on my lawn, and it wasn't a good thing. So I hope when they're doing this next wave that they're going to be more considerate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Paul, can you go ahead with your presentation?
Yes, it will be brief. So thank you, I want to call you Alderman, Councilmember Wynn, and members of the committee, and thank you, Ms. Hammond and Mr. Young, for sharing your thoughts. And I also want to thank Councilmember Newsome for putting a meeting together, I believe it was last week, Thursday, at 10 a.m. It kicked off a really long day on Main Street, learning from the businesses and their struggles. So from those meetings and from the input we received on the calls, staff came up with a recommendation, which is fairly unique for us because we do have some legal constraints about how we address construction-related business losses. But I think the community made a pretty strong case about this being a kind of a really a once in a lifetime, once in a multiple generation event that caused this. And there's some justification to at least consider it. So what we are suggesting is, and by the way, I'll look forward to some questions because I'm sure I'm glossing over some things that we talked about last week. But these two projects have been very invasive. They strip the street of parking. I mean, it's a natural part of what happens in construction, especially when you're doing water mains. And it's also an uninviting environment, and it's keeping people away from the business district. So what staff is suggesting is a kind of really once in a lifetime kind of grant program that I've suggested, and I'm looking for feedback from the committee and also recommendation of the city council. And I'm scaling this based on things I've heard from these two businesses and others. Somewhere in the range of up to $50,000. I put a range of 25 to 50. Just depends on how we want to consider it. You know, we've heard from some businesses that they've lost $50,000 over the 2-month period, or they haven't earned it as much as up to $50,000 compared to last year, year over year. Do we want to consider paying all of that back or reimbursing all of that, or do we want to partner and based on our budget constraints split that? So those are the types of things that I need the committee's help with before we take to council. The eligible businesses we're focused on would be retail or food establishments. I think it's important to focus on them because they are the destinations that people can't get to. If you're a service business, if you have a doctor's appointment, you kind of have to go to your doctor and you'll find a way to park. And I'm not trying to gloss over the fact that it's inconvenient. I'm just saying there's a different level of commitment to seeing a doctor or a chiropractor or others. And also, our retail and food establishments are under immense pressure from other business districts, from the internet, and so on and so forth. So I'm suggesting that we focus the grant to food and retail establishments on Howard Street between Ridge and Clyde. That's where most of the kind of storefront walk-up businesses are, both restaurants and retail. As you go west, you get more auto-oriented and chains. And then on Main Street, it's really the extent of the construction project. It's Hinman to Sherman, and then also that block, the 900 block of Sherman north of Maine. One last thing, because I really do want to wrap. Thinking of creative ways to fund this, we discussed this with our businesses, we discussed it with several elected officials in our calls. We're trying to be creative. You know, some of the suggestions I've put forth is maybe we do a sales tax sharing, a liquor tax share. We share whatever's earned over the next few months to pay back up to the amount that we agree upon. That's one way to do it. We could waive some fees for the year. There aren't many, I mean, no disrespect, there are many fees, but there's, you know, it's only going to add up to so much, right? So liquor license, business registration, food establishment, some of these fees are pretty low, but your liquor license, you know, it's relatively expensive, okay? We've already reimbursed for the one barrier installation. I don't know if there are others that we can reimburse for. If there's a business that has some serious requirements to kind of maybe retrofit the air conditioning or something to fit post-COVID reality, maybe we can contribute TIF to that. That's a system that, you know, TIF would support. I'm also going to recommend later at some point that we we do a kind of a permanent outdoor customer oasis. I think that's something that we could do at some point. I don't want to be even further disruptive to business, but we'll have to plan that out with it's kind of a capital project with TIF. And then, I'm not so sure this is how we want to spend ARPA. I feel like this would be a one-time expense. I really think we need to focus, we'll talk about this later. ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, needs to be an investment. I feel, yes, investing in the businesses to retain them is important, because if they're not able to pay the bills, they're going to leave us. So I'm trying to figure out that balance. But I think the other ways I propose are probably stronger. I've also outlined an application process, very simple, lead form. Looks like I have 5 questions on it. And I understand from some of the businesses that because they're already reporting their income to the city for sales tax and things, that there's a willingness to share the income statements so we can verify how much they've actually lost. So that may have been a little longer than I anticipated, but I really wanted to kind of stress why we're doing it. So I would yield back to you, Chairwoman.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on the part of the committee? Yes, Lisa.
A couple of questions. So I'm curious, do we have precedent, when the Fountain Square project was done and there was construction and those businesses were disrupted? I'm just wondering if there was any precedent set during that kind of, that construction project, and how you would, if we move forward with something like this, how would that impact precedent going forward?
We did not do, the city has never done business interruption reimbursement or payment for any construction project. So Fountain Square, there are some rumors that EDSO received money, but it was not from the city. It may have received them directly from the contractor, but it was, I checked with Laura Biggs and Dave Stoneback, and it did not come from the city, if they did receive some.
So Paul, does staff feel comfortable making the case why this would be distinct and different from, how this has been treated in the past, or how it may be treated in the future?
Yeah, we would need some legal advice on that, but what I really want to stress as part of the grant application process is that we're using the public emergency as kind of it's a once in a, so like I said, it's several generations. The only reason these individuals weren't able to prepare for this construction project, which they knew was coming, is because the pandemic decimated their revenues. So I think, I'd like to think that that's a strong case. There may be legal precedent against it. We'll test it before we launch it with our legal department, but we haven't done that yet because we want to get the framework set up first, we'll check the legality, and then launch it. City Council approve.
Well, my final comment is that, I think a strong business retention program is the hallmark of any efforts that we do. And so I think that as a committee, we should seriously consider how we can help businesses weather, both the pandemic and now the construction that follows on its heels.
Yeah, I think that the ARPA funding or the ARPA program is kind of the rationale for doing this, but I tend to look at the sales tax sharing agreement as probably the better vehicle for providing the funds, because it really gives back directly to what they're generating in terms of business. And with respect to the application process, the financial statements, as I think was pointed out, you're getting reports on sales tax generation anyway, so I'm not sure if that documentation would be sufficient, or if you really need to delve into more comprehensive financial documents. That would be something to look at further. So those are my comments.
That's a good point. We could just look at last year's sales tax submittals and compare them to what we're going to be this year and understand the gap.
The only thing that I would add to that is my business and Eric's business, we only pay 6% liquor tax on the liquor, right? So and I'm completely open to this, I'll throw open my QuickBooks, I can show you, there's gonna be a differentiation between our whole gross with potato chips and sweatshirts and soda pops and stuff like that, than the liquor portion. You know what I mean?
But you do have, other sales, well, I guess
Right.
there's for retail business, there are other
Right.
sales tax.
I'm just saying, like, if you
Yeah.
look at both numbers,
They're gonna be different.
there's gonna be a little bit of fuzzy math going on, but I'm also happy to give you all 4 sets of numbers
Okay.
if you would like to see them.
There's no doubt that the construction has been terribly disruptive and quite the pain for all businesses on Main Street. Yeah, I think we have to be very clear and acknowledge that when this construction of a similar nature happened in Central Street or other places, we never have compensated businesses for business interruption. As terrible as their economic situation may have been. What makes this situation different is that it comes on the heels of COVID, and that is giving us the justification to consider this. So we need to be clear that we're not setting a precedent going forward in a regular old year, that if we do a project on Dempster Street and the customers going to Village Farm Stand have a hard time, that is not something we're going to be able to compensate.
Well, and actually, we do have precedent right on Main Street and on Dempster. On Dempster, there was a massive project to replace the viaduct there that the CTA had, and we worked with the businesses there. The street was closed for chunks of time, and so we did not do business compensation there. And then Main Street, Main and Chicago, 3 of those corners have been developed in the last 20 years, and the most recent one is the southeast corner, the building there, and that severely disrupted those businesses on that side. So I do think in this instance we can distinguish it because it is following the COVID year, or COVID is still going on, but to say that it's just too much to expect businesses to weather a pandemic year and then construction. So I would say that we should make that legal argument that normally businesses might have the ability to plan and cushion, but there was, the pandemic was this instantaneous in terms of the impact it had on businesses. So Paul, what do you, also, do we have any comments from our virtual members? If you want to jump in, Councilmember Burns or Councilmember Braithwaite or Reed?
No, thank you.
Okay, so I do think, Paul, I also think that I agree with Member Lindwall that we have a history of sales tax sharing agreements in Evanston from the Home Depot project, Autobarn, and a number of others that we have done sales tax sharing, even though it's actually reimbursement, but well, we actually did do sharing it over time. So that's something that we have done at different times, and so we that's not something that's new, but it's a tool that we can use in this instance.
I know this is, if I may, I know this is not customary when we're in a committee environment, but would it be okay if I asked the 2 businesses present a quick question about?
Sure. I mean, that's the old-fashioned committee, but
Yes.
where it actually, we did function, we actually called each other by the person. So.
Wow.
And we made faces and shrugged our shoulders and we all knew what was going on, so go ahead.
Okay, great. And we forgot to rise when Mayor Biss arrived.
Yes, that's right.
We are just really losing it. So one question I have from, and I guess I could do this, but I want to make sure that the committee members know. I could do this offline, but I've thought of it as, we'll reimburse you future revenues, but it struck me as I was sitting here that that's not going to solve the Wine Goddess's problem because you had to lay people off and you are going to put your chairs on eBay. So you need the money now. And so I don't know if there's a way that we can just literally take it from the existing sales tax funds. That's, I guess, what I'm saying, versus waiting for this having to generate taxes and reimbursement, because that's going to take, is that going to take 2 more months to generate that level of sales tax to pay yourself back, or 6 months? So that's something that I think we have to be strategic about.
Yeah, I think you have to talk, we'd have to talk to the Corporation Council to make sure that there isn't some aspect of Illinois law that says once you've got it, you can never give it back. So, just to make sure that we have the power to do that. But I'd say we probably have a lot of leeway in terms of how we collect our sales tax and when we do it. So we are home rule. So
Well, it's going into the sales tax, whatever fund it's going into, so it's being collected
and it's
so
ours, right?
insures.
Yeah.
So
it's not-
I
it's
would
not
imagine
passing to the
it's,
state.
yeah, well, it goes to the state and then it comes back.
Yeah.
But once it comes back, it would seem to me that it would be allocated just like any other, revenue. I don't think sales tax is a dedicated fund like the parking fund would be.
Yeah.
Am I able to ask a question? Are we talking about sales tax or are we talking about liquor taxes?
Both.
Because
Liquor,
Both,
well,
okay.
but liquor tax I know doesn't go to the
it
state.
doesn't, yeah, it's just, I pay it on the 20th of each month.
But it goes into a fund within the city, gets deposited in some account, and there's money sitting there.
But we're contemplating other businesses that don't sell food or beverages as well. So I want to make sure what we come up with works for them.
Well, they would, they are paying sales tax, so it would still be the same sort of thing. So there may be multiple funds.
But my concern, it just struck me, Stitchworks, for example, is one of those impacted businesses on Sherman, just north of Maine. It's going to take her a long time to generate. How many sales does she have at 2% to generate her losses for those 2 months?
Well, I think you're looking, it may be a sales tax sharing agreement isn't quite the term.
Right.
What you're doing is saying, we're gonna take some of the sales tax revenue that the city is generating from businesses all over the place. And we're going to share it, so, and then you can have your application, so, so there's some formula that determines how much you can get. Because you're looking at, so in essence, it's kind of like you're getting your money back, but it would be funded by a broader, the whole sales tax generating world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, so, I mean, the sales tax sharing, yes, you're right, Jean, it's, we're sharing our sales tax, but reimbursement is more of what we're specifically talking about here. Because reimbursement is retrospective versus prospective, which is your point, Paul, that it would take a long time to make that up. So I think that's something that we have to discuss or have legal just check on, but I think that that's right. Because otherwise you'd be, and in the past when we've done sales tax sharing agreements, it's been to bring businesses in as an incentive, and it's prospective in the sense that we decrease the sales tax to help them get started as opposed to reaching back and helping people recover.
Do we have any idea what the total ticket bottom line might be?
Yeah. So I intended to go out and count storefronts, and I didn't get to that. But I would estimate there's on those 2 stretches that we discussed, there's somewhere in the range of 12 to 15 businesses that would qualify. So if you did 12 times 40, or even if you did the maximum 12 times 50, you've done 600,000, right? Tell me it's not 6 million. Somebody. So
600,000 strikes me as a pretty big chunk of money.
Were they all impacted, or some more than others? Do you know?
I would argue, my argument in the kind of in the formulation of the grant program is that the food establishments and the retail establishments struggle more than the other, like the medical offices or service businesses. Again, that's because people kind of have to go there.
So you're looking at businesses that pay sales tax or liquor
Right.
taxes, so I think that could be one of the criteria. So if you're not paying,
When you're doing a comparative.
yeah, well, if you're not paying sales or liquor taxes, you're not eligible for this grant program. Could be the way to differentiate.
And, go ahead.
In that Thursday morning meeting, the representation was made without a commitment, but it was indicated that it may be more like 6 or 7 businesses that have been appreciably impacted. So as long as even if the definition of eligible businesses is larger, if in fact many of those were not negatively impacted for whatever reason,
Yeah.
as long as the application process is tight enough regarding real demonstrated financial harm.
Right, and that's a good point. And in addition to the fact that some of the businesses, again, I'll use Stitchwork, and she was really critical of this conversation last week. Her revenues are much lower than Eric and Diana's, right? So that 12 businesses times 50, that would be the extreme maximum. It's gonna be lower than that. And like you said, Mr. Mayor, there are some that may not have been impacted at all, right?
And would it be, say there's 8, would it be divvied like 8 divided by 50, or would it be by need or like loss?
I'm arguing that it needs to be, that you demonstrate your loss, right?
Okay.
And then we'll consider a reimbursement up to a maximum, and I had recommended 50,000, but the committee and the city council might want to recommend something less than that. But I use that 50,000 as kind of the scale for some of the businesses that I've talked to who I know, both on Howard Street and Main Street, who have, for those 2 months of revenue, that's kind of what they're down.
That's what you guys are doing. I would take
Year
the
over year.
survey and then see who's impacted and decide how to move forward. Because you're right, 600,000 is a lot, but if it's 300,000, it's not quite as significant.
And if it means that we retain businesses and then go on paying sales tax revenue for the next 10 years,
Then you can get the money back.
Yeah.
Well, one additional question, you noted there was talk of, as this construction moves forward and doing some placemaking at Custer there. And I recall seeing early renderings that was part of early thinking for the construction project. Is that still included in the construction, the scope of the construction over there, or no?
I don't recall a Custer Oasis Plaza.
So I think, with the streetscape,
Yep.
so my storefront, the grade, they have to they can't bring the sidewalk down, they can't lift the street up, so they have to build a stairway to get, and there's some flowers and some plantings there. Is that what you're referring to? I think, because that was a part of the original streetscape plan, but that was only the corner itself, it wasn't the.
I'm just wondering, as a part of the construction there, obviously the businesses have done something to do some outdoor dining, but a rendering that I saw as a part of that proposal process included placemaking on Custer, recognizing that there was something that could happen there, and I didn't know if that is now part of the scope of the construction or if that fell out of the scope.
It's not in the scope of the next phase of the construction, so I'm suggesting, because I'm not sure if that construction's happening next year or if it's going to be the following year.
It's not legally 100% certain.
Okay.
For all practical purposes, we can plan on the streetscape portion not happening next year.
Right. So then what we'll do is we'll add on to that is what I would suggest. And we have TIF balance to help create that.
And that's a very appropriate use of TIP funds. The interior rehab kind of thing, I mean, that might be, but that's, I would not, that would have to be on a business by business basis, and it's just for rehabilitation. So there are a lot of limits on what you can do to
With Jeff, for that.
for that, but the streetscape enhancement, that's perfectly legitimate. So,
Says our committee TIF expert.
Yes, it is
For the
good to have.
moment.
Yeah, right.
Councilmember Burns has his hands up.
Yes, Councilmember Burns, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted a little more explanation, Paul, as to why staff or you are not recommending we use ARPA money or cautioning that we not use ARPA money in this situation.
So I'm
I
gonna,
saw, yeah.
I'm gonna turn this around, so I'm addressing everybody. I'm just a little concerned. I mean, it feels like it's tailor-made for it. You know, we're addressing an immediate, loss as a result of the pandemic. We are not prepared yet, as we'll talk in hopefully 5-10 minutes, to spend that money, right? We learned that, and I don't know if other members of the committee have input on that, but I feel like we just launched a conversation on Monday that presented a framework. But technically, Councilmember, you're right. We have the ability as a community to spend that money. It's there, waiting for us to spend. We just haven't, as a community, decided what the mechanisms are going to be. Again, if we're scaling, if we're going to stick with the buckets that the city, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, but the city manager had presented a breakdown of the ARPA funding, and $5 million comes to economic development. So is that how we want to spend? Let's do the math. Is that 10% of the ARPA money for economic development? Maybe it is. That's up to you. But technically, it's a perfect use for it. I'm thinking we need to invest it. This will be money to invest in retaining businesses, but it's a one-time spend. We'll never see it again. Other than the fact that we see our lovely businesses open every day.
I think the timing issue is very relevant here. And the ARPA funding, I think we owe it to the community to have a process, and it's going to take time to figure out, to establish that process and then implement that process. And the businesses on Main Street and Howard Street need the assistance sooner rather than later. So I think that's the argument against using ARPA funds for this particular need. If the timing were different, it would be perfect use of ARPA funds.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that I agree with Councilmember Newsman. This is something that we can do fairly rapidly, I would think. And I think the ARPA discussion is going to take a little bit longer because we want to make sure that it applies equitably across all of our businesses, and then figure out what's going to be the universe of what we want to spend money on, and understand what that is before we start spending it. But here we have a mechanism that we can use immediately.
And perhaps in that leftover bucket of proposed ARPA money, maybe we can use that to backfill whatever holes we're digging over here at some point.
It's a terrible pun.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that it's worth looking at waiving the fees as well. I mean, it's going to be a fairly small amount of money, but it's a gesture anyway. And it probably won't, again, overly, you're getting those revenues from other businesses in town.
What do we need now to be able to move this forward?
Okay,
Yes,
so
Because we're going to lose somebody.
yeah, we need a motion to what I would ask is that motion to approve a recommendation to the council. I don't know the next terminology to use, but you're going to be asking me to fine-tune this
For
request.
the creation of a
Framework.
a framework for
Yes.
relief with respect to the businesses on Howard and Main Street.
Yes.
You want a motion?
Yes.
I move that we recommend, direct staff to develop a framework for presentation to the city council for a business impact grant that focuses primarily in terms of funding sources on use of sales tax, sales and liquor tax, waiving fees, potentially using economic development funding, and creating an application process that focuses on either the financial statements or sales and liquor tax reports to the city, or presentation to the city council. I think I've said that twice, but
Wonderful.
I will second that. Second.
Okay.
all right.
So Paul, can you call the roll?
Councilmember Newsome.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Member Gallagher.
Yes, aye.
Member Lindwall.
Aye.
Member Deacon.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, good. So staff has direction. Our Main Street merchants know where we're going to.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Paul, for thinking hard about this
One and tacos for everybody.
and for all the.
Yeah.
Good night. Have a great trip.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Kelly, I'm not gonna try to be too formal, but Ms. Gallagher, thank you for your suggestion to survey. What I'll do is I'll figure out the food establishments and retailers and check in.
And I should have welcomed you to our first in-person meeting.
I'm so
It was
excited.
really- Yes, and welcome to economic development.
Thank you.
There's a lot to get, we're gonna do a lot.
I'm so excited. It was
Yeah.
hard to jump in on Zoom. I'm like, what is this?
Right, yes, yeah, well, that last meeting was really long, too.
Yeah.
It's much better than yours. Yeah. All right. Mayor Biss, did you want to say something?
Always, but I'm sure. But can I take this off?
Oh, yeah, I mean, we all agreed.
I'm just a member of the public now.
Yeah.
You are in fact an at-large member of every committee, so.
Should I sit it there?
Yeah.
Only if you really want to. Okay, so next we have, as promised, we're going to talk about ARPA. And Paul has a presentation for us about economic development strategy using the American Rescue Plan Act.
How would you like to talk about this? Or present first, or do you want?
Yes, do we have public comment with respect to the ARPA? Yes, Annie, you wanted to speak. Go ahead, Ms. Coakley.
Good evening, Chair Wynn and members of the Economic Development Committee. I'm Ann Coakley, the Director of Downtown Evanston. And tonight I'm here to ask that you advocate on behalf of the business community of Evanston to invest the $5.5 million that was identified in a memo and presentation shared at Monday's City Council meeting, which was ultimately based on feedback from community town hall meetings, to be allocated for economic development programs, strategies, policies, and activities, which will improve the economic well-being and quality of life for all of Evanston by creating and retaining jobs and providing a stable tax base. That's it.
Thank you. That's our goal. Okay, do we have anyone else on the call who would like to speak to the ARPA spending discussion?
Yeah, hello.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Payton.
Hi, thank you. So, of course, I'm advocating for small landlords, minority landlords. As you know, this Saturday will be the end of the moratorium on evictions. And I believe the city is not taking this seriously. And landlords like myself, and Carla Sutton is on the line, hopefully he will speak as well. We are not getting help. Every business in this city gets help except for the landlord. We're providing affordable units and we get a kick in the butt for a code violation. This is very serious. 911. I hope that you will consider landlords need help. We have, some of our tenants have not paid rent. Going forward, when this eviction moratorium is over, we have a problem with future renting. which I have a problem right now, because the eviction will be closed. The landlord cannot see evictions through March 2022. So if someone gets evicted next week, we can't see that. And then someone could potentially be in our residence for another year not paying. This is very serious, especially to us minority landlords providing affordable housing. I'm gonna say it at every meeting possible. We need help. Just like you consider these businesses for $50,000, you're saying that they should get money right away. I've been asking for years. Now it's a pandemic, which is even more serious. So if you're concerned about affordable housing, once again, then you need to invest in your landlords. And this is a business too, and we're bleeding right now. So I hope that you will consider that we get money as well, right away. Thank you, Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Ms. Payton, that's a very good point. All right, is there anyone else on the Zoom call who would like to speak as public comment? Just go right ahead and talk if you'd like. Okay, all right, Paul, I think we don't have any other commenters. Take it away.
All right. So for the Zoomers, I am going to try to operate this on shared screen mode so you can see it. And I know how to do that. I'm just trying to find the right tab, so just bear with me. I can't wait for the Zoom to be over. Okay, so I am going to expand the screen and I will see you shortly. Please. Okay, let's go into presentation. Can Councilmember Burns, can you see a presentation slide?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to try to quickly get through a presentation that I prepared for the last committee, and but I'm going to just forgive me in advance because I'm going to move very quickly. We don't have a lot of time. And in fact, I think we committed to ending this meeting at 8:15. So I want to quickly get through it, but I also want to set some context as we talk about the economic development portion of ARPA. And once again, when I reference ARPA, it stands for American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. So from this presentation tonight, I'm hopeful that you will take away that we have a strong team in place to continue the work we've already started. The SSAs, the merchant groups, all the things we've done over the last, the 10 years I've been on staff and prior to that. You all know this, I don't have to remind you, but recovery is going to be difficult. It has been difficult. It's going to require leadership and openness to change. I think we're seeing that develop. I'm recommending we invest in our economic well-being. And again, I'm going to focus a lot on workforce. I don't think we do enough of that in this community. There's probably a number of reasons why, but I think we really need to start focusing on that, and we'll get into that later. E-commerce isn't going anywhere. We are going to be feeling that competitive pressure from e-commerce forever. So we need to figure out how we're going to rebuild and how are we going to compete in that environment. And I argue that our kind of built-in natural environment is our comparative advantage, the economic concept of how do we compete against our competitors. So we should be really showcasing that So to really increase the quality of life for our community members, attract more visitors, and have an easier time keeping our workers in place. I promised I would go quick, and I know I hung on that slide for probably too long, but those are the things I really want you to focus on. The pandemic, retail apocalypse, totally expedited it. E-commerce, again, it's killing us. We've got to come up with a way to address it. We think that there was going to be a physical aftermath to this. We think people are going to be spread out a little more, that it's going to be slow to come back. People are going to want to be outside doing the things we've already seen them doing. So that's why Bookman's Alley is an important new amenity. Collectivo's patio. Who would have ever thought when the city council approved the expansion of permanent outdoor cafes, how important that little coffee shop patio would be. We talked about the Custer Oasis already. And then we know that COVID-19 has really exposed the inequalities in our community and across the country. And again, leadership, creativity, let's align our city operations and policies, stabilize, improve city services, expand revenues. Let's get away from our economic development mindset where we're focused on growth and talk more about the well-being of our community. And that goes again into the workforce development, financial wellness initiatives that we've already launched. But I also argue that we need to think about affordable housing. It's not a regulatory issue, but also an economic well-being and an economics challenge. And then continue to do the technical assistance program that we've been known to do. And then again, that comparative advantage. How do we make this, continue to make it an impressive place to visit? I'll stop there because I was about to share an anecdote that would distract us. So post-pandemic, it's not just about development and growth. Again, I want to talk more and more about this idea of supporting our standard of living, really establishing the definition. We look at, I pulled this from a text that I refer to often, establishes a minimum standard of living for all and increases the standard over time. It reduces inequality and it promotes and encourages sustainable resource use and production. I think we all have that in our hearts, and every day as elected officials and staff, we want to do this for our community. I don't necessarily think we plan for it very well, and we certainly haven't yet combined our economic development initiatives and plans with this climate action resilience plan that we talked about. So those are some things we have to do. So the new strategy, ARPA is an investment, not a spend. Let's learn from what we learned over the last 18 months on this, the most recent civil rights movement, pandemic, e-commerce changing us forever, and Evanston is a desirable place. Again, I'm just reinforcing those over and over and over. Okay, we're back to invest, not spend. 5 things I want to talk about briefly. Shifting to an economic vitality model, a built here by us kind of workforce strategy. We've got to really support our merchant districts, update our city codes and city services so they align with what the market is signaling and so we can move quickly and get businesses open. And then we had our business task force report. Again, I'm not reading all of these. Focus on the economic well-being. Let's update our model. I'll talk a little bit about, as we go on, I introduced this concept last year. I have an intern from the Northwestern University who's helping me. It's a circular model, but the idea is let's operate in the light green area, which is where we are building our economic mission on a strong social foundation, caring about things like gender equality, housing, water, food, etc. But we're not growing so fast that we're depleting kind of natural resources. I will speak about this in future meetings and how we're going to make that into our future strategies. We have so many nonprofits in our community. Let's get people unified and working around a plan and initiative. This specifically recommendation 2 is about workforce development strategy. Who's going to build Evanston's infrastructure of tomorrow? Who's going to build all this stuff? And that's where I say it's going to be built here by us. We have no excuses. We have an unemployment rate that is better than the nation, better than the state, but it's still significant. It's around, I think, around 7%. I think Bill Smith's on the line. He can correct me if I'm wrong. And we always know that unemployment rate is mostly composed of our black and brown community, so we really need to address that. And I think there are ways that we can help with a workforce development program that will implement the sidewalks, the water sewer, the future electric vehicle charging station, all the things that are going to be required to keep this community going. We should be building them here. We should not be having lowest bid kind of contracts that pull, we'll call them outsiders. I don't want to be provincial, but there's an opportunity to go local with that. Lots of business district improvement opportunities. Ms. Coakley talked about the need to make sure that we stay focused on that. I know we've invested a lot in Fountain Square at $6 million, but we can't sit back. We have to continue to reinvent. People really like going to Old Orchard. It's a mall, it's a manufactured kind of environment, but it's really nice, and there's a lot of people just hanging out there, not necessarily shopping every store, but enjoying the environment. I think we could have an authentic experience here. Requires some planning. Requires really some outside, somebody holding a mirror to us and helping us see what we need. Sometimes we get a little too forested trees. I don't know if I'm mixing that metaphor, but we really need, I would recommend some outside help for that. Review all of our land use policies, and we have multiple outdated plans, including that West Evanston overlay. This city council acted quickly and updated the code to allow for ground floor service uses in D districts, which is really important as we shift away from retail in some of these locations. Again, we need to start thinking about those more deeply. And then the task force plan we presented could have been 6 months ago. Lots and lots of recommendations and plans in there. That group is going to work on prioritizing the ones they think are most important. I'm not going to spend much time with this. On Monday night, I peeled some of the slides from that for the benefit of those who weren't on city council. We have a $43 million allocation. Half of it's arrived. We have to identify kind of negative impact that COVID-19 has had on businesses. The recommended priority uses that were presented to the city council includes this middle bullet, which is stimulating economic recovery. But I think instead of thinking in silos or buckets, I tried to use a metaphor earlier that described a platter where you have a comprehensive meal and you're eating it all together and not eating the one thing first and the second thing second. Because everything is interrelated. We can't, workforce development is going to fall in social services as much as economic development. Childcare is going to be social services, it's going to be education, it's going to be infrastructure because we have to build the spaces for it, but it's also economic because we need to get women back into the workforce. Directly from the Act is stimulating economic recovery, childcare, development of affordable housing. Even the Act shows it as kind of a blended economics model. Investing in infrastructure, again, I want to point that out. And then we presented this idea that perhaps one of the tools we could use would be, it'd be called for this purpose, we're calling it the ERIF, the Evanston Recovery Investment Fund. You take the $5 million, you have an application process, we've outlined the child care workforce, small business recovery, hospitality industry from the Act. And in a moment, we'll go over some of the ideas and get some feedback from the committee. But there would be this fund that people apply for as this is one model, or city staff recommends a series of programs that comes from this $5 million fund. I'm just calling the bucket the ERIF. That's how I'm looking at this. It doesn't have to be a separate entity. It's just the way I'm looking at it, the investment model. And then this language came out before we did the numerous town halls, and that apparently appeared in the city council memo. I'm just noticing that. And then we designed a scoring and matrix system. For those who weren't at city council, these were the buckets that were created. 5.5 was proposed to be allocated to economic development. We have heard from some committee members, and I even think, the council members, and I believe the mayor himself even suggested that maybe there should be some consideration for more on the social service side. So this is just today kind of a recommended funding framework. We're not there yet. And then there was this additional component added that focuses on inclusive and equitable recovery. Again, investment opportunity, not a spending plan. All of this is online. I'm sure you'll all read it later. And really, again, catalytic opportunities is what we're talking about. This is an opportunity, if you pass the 5/5 TIF, we have special service area programs with our downtown and main Dexter Mile. There's private financing. There's other sources of funds that we can leverage with the ARPA funding. Skipping some of this. All right, so what I want to do now, if there aren't any questions, that's a framework. I'm sorry that that's like the umbrella. It took a little longer than, that's not too bad, it's 10 minutes. What I would like to do, I'd like to work on two things in the committee format. One is to bring up kind of a sample list of projects, and then also talk a little bit about the funding mechanism that we could, the things that we care about. What is the return on investment measures that I've heard Council Member Reed talk about? So it's going to be a little clunky here while I shift to my spreadsheet, so bear with me. And while I'm doing that, if there are any questions, I would ask Chair Wynn to entertain a question or two on doing this.
So committee members, and Mr. Mayor, please chime in and give your thoughts on this enormous task that we have in front of us, but it's really interesting and challenging and exciting. So, what we've had a lot of good ideas over the years, but haven't had the money to do them. And so this actually is this pot of money that actually we can use now for many of the ideas that have come up. But I think certainly, as Paul was saying, the pandemic has revealed or exposed a lot of inequities, so we need to keep that in mind as well. And I really like, Paul, your framing of this as not spending but investment, because we won't get these dollars again, we won't get this opportunity again. So we really have to be mindful that here's our opportunity to actually invest and leverage it into the future. Thoughts?
Well, I have a ton of thoughts, but I don't know, because I wasn't part of all the conversations if this is a repeat, but just making Evanston a destination, like you said, so why would people come here? And it's the lake, right? That's what's different. And you don't walk through Evanston and think oh, this is a lake community at all. But, I went to Breckenridge or some Colorado small town, and you felt it, right? It was, obviously the mountains are right there, but the town had this vibe, and how to weave that through our town with honoring the Fifth Ward history, right? Making that part of our cool story, I think will bring more people here. And my thought too was highlighting the best of the best. We have a couple businesses that are amazing, right? Hume's a destination point. How do we get another Hume on the other side of Evanston to help fill maybe a storefront gap and incentivize them to have two locations? I was thinking the Spice House, and I'm sure there's many, many more great gems of Evanston that maybe that neighborhood only knows. And that could help. And I don't know, so things to do at the lakefront. I don't know if we've ever investigated making that a marina at all, or?
Yes, we did 4 years ago.
Okay.
It would be very difficult. The Army Corps of Engineers wouldn't give us permission.
I see. Okay. But there's I don't know, you can do stuff in the winter there, or there's just some ideas that I've had, but I don't know what the temperament of the group is, or what your ideas are. That's just what's, as you were speaking, what we have here that we can capitalize and can rebrand ourselves. Anyway,
I'll mention the need to do whatever we can to promote Evanston as a destination for arts and entertainment. So we can bring folks in to patronize the bars and restaurants when they are done seeing a show. Or visiting an art exhibit, or we give them a reason to come to town, not
Right.
just to go to dinner.
right.
They can go to dinner while they're here.
To your point, a couple of areas that resonate with me. One is thinking about the catalytic opportunities, Paul, and I think that you sort of mentioned those, and I see a few opportunities there. One is bringing, is it the Lifeline Theater? Is it Lifeline? No, it's Northlight Theater, because it's to your point, right, of bringing people in and then you capture them and you capture those spending dollars. Two would be moving the farmers market from the parking lot to the middle of town, so those folks come into the farmers market and they visit the businesses. So looking at those catalytic opportunities, getting the movie theater back up and running, because that is such a huge loss. So beyond catalytic opportunities, the other thing that I would talk about is sort of placemaking. I think that's incredibly important. And Paul, to your point of leveraging our natural and our built environment, I don't think we're doing that right now. I think that we need to be more creative in what I would call placemaking. So the rendering we saw, the proposal we saw for Bookman's Alley, I was like, Yahoo! That's exactly what we need to be doing. I think I think last year I sent around a picture of what Collectivo did in Milwaukee to do placemaking. Yes. And we need to be thinking, we need to be pushing, we need to be more creative. I would like to see something happening at the lagoon, that underutilized building there. That's placemaking. That provides that sense of identity, that sense of self. It brings people in, it gives them a reason to be here, and gives us something, because as great as Evanston is, and Paul, to your point, we need to know how special we are. I think we've gotten complacent. And when I go to places like Naperville or the North Shore or out of town to these other areas, their commercial corridors are more vibrant. And I understand that we're competing with Old Orchard, but we have to compete with Old Orchard. And so we need to be smarter, and we need to be thinking creatively about how to do placemaking and create stronger commercial corridors. So those are the couple points that resonate with me.
In addition to adding new amenities to do this placemaking, we have to maintain the infrastructure that we have now. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from residents of the Fourth Ward that are not happy with the way downtown looks and feels.
Yeah.
Do they have any?
For example, the tunnel under the train tracks at, between Maple and.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah, just one example.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a planning phrase called "clean it up, green it up," right? As the first place, and I think we need some of that, because we've lost businesses, and the town is showing it. It's
Like
not sparkling.
It looks like it's been through a pandemic.
Indeed, it does.
But sometimes don't. That's the thing. Like sometimes don't necessarily look that way. I think we can do something.
I think there's two different. I mean, we were less well positioned economically to weather a pandemic than all of our neighbors, because the daytime office population and Northwestern are such key economic drivers.
Okay.
So I'm not bothered at all that we sort of look more like hell coming out of the pandemic than Wilmette. That I think was totally predictable.
Yeah.
What I am bothered by, or what I do think is a actual issue that's worth working on, is, I don't know how to say this in a mayoral way, I think our downtown is terrible. You've got very wide one-way streets, right? So it's designed in a way that's built for cars and not humans. I mean, even Fountain Square, which has a lot to recommend it, it's cut in the middle by this relatively fast street, and so if you're sitting near any of it, you can't really hear conversation very well. I think there's and I'm no expert in exactly what the right solutions are, but I don't believe that our downtown is built, to your point, to be a place that is welcoming on the human scale for pedestrians. I don't know if the ARPA funding is the right place to solve that problem. I believe that is a concrete, solvable problem of the scope that we ought to be tackling. And if if we as a community believe that this funding is the place to do that, I'm all in. I think it's.
Can we use it to hire someone to do like an actual plan to like?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you can.
Did I just feed into your next point?
I was going to suggest to Mr. Mayor that we could hire a consultant to do that kind of work for us to at least start the planning.
Yeah.
I'll say, as someone who's been here for a long time, I raised the issue of the one-way streets a long time ago, because that was, and I see the hands, thank you, Jonathan has told me that there are hands, but I mean, you can see when cities did that. And it was something in the early 70s or so, because that's when Evanston
did the one-ways?
Yes, because they weren't there originally, and it became this idea, and you can see how it devastated a lot of other communities, that it suddenly became very car-centered, and you need people to get in and get out. But it completely forgot about the idea that there's a destination here. And a number of years ago, I raised it with our traffic engineer and said, how do we undo that? And at that point, it was such a big task that he said, we can't do that. But it is a point. I mean, back then we simply didn't have the funds, but here's an opportunity to do that now. And we have our Fountain Square, and for a long time we had the walkability that Schaumburg built itself a downtown, and Naperville realized it had a river walk that it should do. And I'll just say I was out in Maryland, this DC area this weekend, and Howard County, which 40 years ago was farms, now has, and it was planned, it was like Columbia and Reston and Virginia planned. And what they do is they build town centers, out of old agricultural, it's placemaking. And what they're trying to recreate is Evanston, and what we have here. And you see it in all these places that people go to for vacation. They like Georgetown in DC, they like Charleston, and they like Boston because of its walkability. And we've already got that. So that's actually, we need to re-emphasize that about you can come to our downtown and stroll and find one thing after another, and what's down that block and what's down that block, and I see the lake over there. But what the mayor has said is that we lost, is it 30,000 downtown office workers?
No, it's probably relatively close to 10,000.
Oh, 10,000, sorry, downtown. And then the number of Northwestern students that are ubiquitous, and you don't realize how many there are until they're gone. And then all of those businesses that they supported with the loss of the 10,000 office workers went under. Whereas our business districts that didn't necessarily depend on them, I know I'm talking a long time, like the Main Dumpster Mile and Central Street and some of our others, they don't look like the downtown looks. So we have to, first of all, attract those office workers back, because they're really key for the daytime life. And then the Northwestern students are always going to be there, but
I think the office workers will come back though.
well, that's a big word as to whether they will or not, because there's a lot of tug on the part of millennials to stay. They like working from home more than being back, and so we have to find something out about that.
Maybe you should call the others. I'd love to speak to that, because Paul and I have done a lot of talking with both building owners and others about that. If maybe after the others get a chance to speak, I'd love to say a word about that.
So I see Councilmember Reed, and then Councilmember Burns, and then Annie Coakley.
I'll reserve comments for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burns?
Yes, I can only speak for myself. What I'm looking for are projects that the private market will not fund. I think we need to be very careful. Someone who is going from one industry to another into agriculture, and everybody likes low interest, no interest money, right? And so I think we need to be careful. If the private market will fund projects that are applying for ARPA money, we should let it fund it, so that not only can we bring those important things to the community, but we can do additional work. And so I think we need to be very careful there. Everybody wants low interest or no interest money, and one thing that I have coming to the Economic Development Committee soon is to use part of the money, ARPA money in economic development would be a good fit to consider undergrounding the ComEd wires, specifically in areas where it's impeding on our ability to develop. So in the 5th Ward, it's a strip on Emerson Street, it's right across the street from a senior center, and because of the wires and other circumstances, development has really been non-existent, and we haven't been able to do any better for our seniors in our community and other residents in the area than a convenience store that sells chips and different Euro and fast food restaurants, and that's really it. And a bus company and other things that are great businesses, but I think we can do better. That's such a large area there that if we were able to underground those wires, we can add some green space right across the street for our seniors at Jacob Blake Manor and some nice commercial options for them. So I think that's a good example of something that would not happen if not for public funding. And so I think those are the opportunities that we really need to pursue, especially early on. And I absolutely, would support planning. I think good comprehensive planning is another thing that would not happen if not for public funding. So just wanted to add those comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Burns, I think you're absolutely right in terms of when you look at the map of where those high tension wires, the amount of land they take up on the old Mayfair right of way, it is stunning how big a swath of land is sitting there being used for high tension. I mean, for something that now we could, if they could bury the wires, would suddenly be available for the community to use in all kinds of ways. And it is remarkable when you see how big that swath is, how far it goes, and what neighborhoods it cuts through. So
just as a last point, I think also, because you reminded me, my last point was, part of good economic development, I think, is connecting our neighborhoods. You mentioned the old Mayfair line. There's an opportunity to create a bike and a walk path in sections of that walk path. And I know the former council has seen different proposals and ideas from community groups to do that. I don't think we can go the whole length, from Emerson and or Simpson and Green Bay all the way to Chicago, but we certainly can connect more of our neighborhoods. The city has been really good, Sarah Flax and her team, of acquiring some of those parcels. I just had a meeting with her the other day, and there's a few parcels just east of ETHS that we've been trying to get a hold of for a while, and we have them now. And so, so I just wanted to double down on what you just said. There's an opportunity to connect our neighborhoods and create more walkability and bikeability using the old Mayfair line. Thank you.
Yeah. Annie, did you want to go ahead?
No, I don't know if I get the opportunity not being a committee member.
Yes, no, this is a whole discussion. Yeah, and you're a critical member of the team here.
I just wanted to start with the maintenance contract that downtown Evanston has is about $200,000 a year, and that provides 5 days a week garbage removal for seasonal flower planting changes and all of the flower planting, some weeding, some light sweeping, and an annual power wash that is about $30,000, which just happened, and they have to come back out because there is still, it's just not as clean as it normally is. So that's, that's one thing, but I think that there's an opportunity here to kind of consider Clean Slate. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with Clean Slate, but they're a social enterprise of CARA, which is a larger organization, and they provide paid transitional jobs around $14 an hour. Traditionally, those jobs would be clean and greening. So graffiti removal, sweeping, garbage removal, some power washing or hotspot cleaning in the streets. They're very kind commonly used in other special service areas in Chicago communities. And, their employee impact is significant, so maybe 389 people start the year and may continue on working with CleanSafe, but for the most part, a good percentage of those jobs go on to permanent and long-term placements. That's like the core of their model. And I would love to bring that to Evanston, not just for downtown, but to all of our commercial districts, and perhaps we can, pull our dollars together and use the service in our high-trafficked areas. So that's just one thing, and I guess the real question is, I know that there will be like an open call for ideas on how these dollars can be spent, and I'm wondering, that's what I know is that there's going to be an open call, but I don't know if Paul knows or if staff can talk to how that is actually going to work. Because I plan on submitting quite a few ideas, frankly.
Paul, do you want to address that? And then Peter, I'll call on you. Or shall we talk to Peter first and then you want to address that?
Why don't you do that?
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Braithwaite.
The history and numbers behind the burying of the lines. And I think one of the things, maybe Paul, you can be a part of this conversation, but meet with Director Stonebeck as well as the community relations person from ComEd to refresh the numbers to see what it would look like. Because obviously something like this is going to happen right away. But if identified funds are there, and I would also think, Paul, are you making any contact with Cook County? Or is anyone from our staff to take advantage of their $1 billion fund that I think I've read somewhere? The funds that they're receiving from the federal government?
Right, so the short answer to that question is, I don't know. I haven't spoken with my colleagues at Cook County yet. I have seen that they do have a $1 billion allocation. Of course, they'll distribute that countywide, but I think it's definitely worthwhile. I assume they're going to do the same thing we're doing, which is splitting, covering up some of their losses organizationally. But yes, we'll do that. It's got to be.
Yeah, we can take this conversation offline, but to Councilmember Burns, I'll send the email right now. I regret that I have another appointment at 8, so I'm going to have to drop off the call, but look out for that email, and Paul, I'll follow up with you to see where those Cook County numbers fall and where we might be able to leverage those funds as well for this big project.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks all.
Might there be the attitude amongst the Cook County decision makers that Evanston is already getting a whole heck of a lot compared to other communities, and therefore Cook County money should be spent elsewhere?
Yeah, I would be very pessimistic about getting a dime from Cook County, given our comparative affluence relative to certain parts of the county, and given our striking allocation compared to other communities of comparable size. But I would say this is
Importantly, we look at all buckets, and if they have to distribute it countywide, I wouldn't see why we wouldn't want to get in line or at least understand where their buckets are, but that's my perspective.
No doubt, but I would say this is a multi-trillion-dollar piece of legislation, and the parts outside of our 43 million that I'd be most enthusiastic about is all the non-municipal aid, making sure that our nonprofits are getting every dime they can possibly have, and that we're providing the technical support they need, making sure our small businesses are getting all that stuff. There's tons of money in this legislation that's not coming straight to municipalities, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't enter our borders.
Right, yeah, that's a very, very good point. And also, I heard somewhat good news about the infrastructure bill today, but that has taken so many twists and turns that I didn't get really enthusiastic about it. But that actually might be a way to tap into money to bury the high tension lines as another source to do that, because burying those lines should have been done a long time ago, but it's colossally expensive. But, I mean, it's true all over the country, they should be buried. Okay. Now, do you want to address the issue that Annie raised?
Yes, I will address the issue that my colleague Annie Coakley raised. So at the city, Ms. Coakley was referring to a potential process where the city does an open call. Like we will launch, let's just say, I'm just making up a date, September 1st, we open up a funding call. Anybody who's interested in an economic development plan or economic development investment from ARPA would fill out an application, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll give them 30 days or some timeline. Period closes like any other grant application. And then there's an evaluation process that uses a predetermined matrix to score, or rubric, or whatever you want to call it. And then we bring that to the Economic Development Committee for consideration. The committee would then review staff's scoring, validate them in a way, and then recommend funding to the city council. That is one way that we could do this. We were trying to come up with ways to organize a process and generate interest from the private sector. Now, I do recall Mayor Biss mentioning during that conversation that there are some ideas that staff and also the Business Task Force and others have already come up with. And the Economic Development Committee has reviewed those and has supported a lot of those and have also contributed ideas. So, you know, we have to balance how we take the ideas that are already out there, because frankly, I'm gonna guess there's a bunch of ideas out there that are really good, but not to be too arrogant, I'm gonna guess that a lot of those are already in reports and spreadsheets. But with that said, there is no process yet. It's an idea, and the Economic Development Committee has to help determine if that's the way it's going to go, and the City Council does as well. So I think I explained that well enough, probably too much. Can I shift to the some of the ideas that have come up over the last 6 months? I mean, some of these ideas, by the way, and here I go. I'm going to share the spreadsheet.
Which is the one that's page 24 on the packet?
Actually, I don't know the page number. There's a sample I provided in the packet,
Yeah.
but it's really a screenshot. And what I would like to do is show.
Oh, this is different, I think.
Okay, I'll have to take a look at page 24 of the packet, the table.
The table. I'm looking at the table that has project title Child Support Affordable Housing.
Okay.
Switching
Yeah,
to
this
one.
is different. Okay, so Annie, can you see this spreadsheet? Do I need to blow it up? Okay. It might be a bit of an eye chart. I'm trying to figure out. Let me expand this a bit.
Oh, so we are looking at this one?
Yeah. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. So let's just leave it at this. So what I've done is I've tried to distill a lot of the ideas that have come up through various meetings with businesses. And again, my lens is small business, same as Annie, same as Main Dumpster Mile, Howard Street, all of the groups that manage these merchant districts. And this is the feedback we're getting. And remember, there are 5 other buckets of money that other groups are going to be talking about. So I'm strictly talking about the economic development components of it. So again, what I would like from the committee at the end of this is just some feedback on whether or not you think something should or should not be in it. We'll eliminate it, we'll score it, however you want to do it. But at the end of this, it would be nice to have some level of understanding of prioritization of what we should be focused on. Okay, so again, for example, child care support. Is there a way to use the funding to literally help build a daycare or help build out space for a daycare or just fund nonprofits that need to expand. Not my expertise, and this may also come out of other buckets of ARPA money. So, but I do want to highlight that I do think it's an economic development initiative, especially if we're thinking about economic well-being, getting women back to work. I think of generally minority populations who may have challenges in that way, and this could be managed. Affordable housing, again, there is a bucket, I think, kind of defined for this, but I'm showing you there are opportunities here. If we took ARPA and TIF, there's probably CDBG, there's probably, well, we know there's tax credits, there's all kinds of ways to fund affordable housing, but if there are some gaps, let's maybe use ARPA to fill it. Job creation, livability, those are the things that we're talking about in economic recovery. A business incubator. We've talked for months, really for years, about a retail incubator. And we came really close with 37 Oaks, and then ARPA was released, and the university announced their share of minority-led incubators. So we're trying to figure out a way to program that retail incubator with kind of a general minority-led business incubator. Commercial kitchen, I became aware of a space today that might be something that we could help fund, and I'll talk about that at a later meeting.
And I would say, we once had that, and now I think there's so much more interest in those small businesses starting off. I mean, we funded a number of times with almost micro grants, small businesses that have grown significantly. And I think there is this move now towards specialty food, understanding who cooked it, away from the big processed food. So I think that's an interesting idea.
Right, we had council member Wynn was referencing, we supported, the city supported Now We're Cooking,
right,
which is in the 5th Ward. We supported the salary of the manager of the space, and there was really a lot of energy out of that space. So it failed for a different reason, but but there's a lot of.
But it did launch a number of small businesses, and I think there's even more interest in that now.
Workforce development, I said it a lot.
Here's the Clean Slate program that Annie was talking about.
Annie's Clean Slate's in there. Again, we could use ARPA and TIF to fund training programs, to build out space for it. Again, I'm showing you the overlap, child care services along with workforce development.
On the workforce development one, I would add some park-related weatherization type jobs. Also lead service replacement. That's going to be a huge business opportunity for the next 30 years throughout the state. So if we can get people lined up to do that work in Evanston, they can show on the road too.
And solar and electric, all of those green energy jobs that you need some certification or training in. But I think that the key part to my mind of the training programs are that there's a job at the end of it, that you're not just certified in something, but you have to get the job lined up to go with it. And those are the training programs that, from my research, are successful, that people stick with and follow through, because they know if they complete it, there's a job waiting for them. But if we just have training programs, life happens and people tend to fall out of them sometimes, or they complete them and
then there's no job.
And then there's no job. Right.
So making sure the business exists, that's ready
So
to receive.
almost do a critical path backwards from the job, or what we see the job is, back into the workforce development, rather than the other way around, saying, we'll teach people to code, and then where is the job? But so who's doing weatherization or lead replacement? What type of training do you need for that? Where can we get the training from? And who can we recruit into that? So those going the other way rather than from the ground up.
Exactly, and the simplest thing about the lev is that we're doing it. right? And so when we look at some of the, what Hamar has been proposing in terms of, connecting some of the efforts to do retrofits and clean energy installations with the workforce program, that problem is, the closer our organization is to the job itself, the easier that problem is to solve. I mean, that organizing principle's gotta be deployed here.
So may I ask before you continue on the thinking around including affordable housing, go up to that top of that list, the affordable housing and childcare support from the bucket of economic development. I mean, we can make connections wherever we want, we can argue it, but given, I think that you originally talked about economic development may see $10 million from ARPA funding. That was a meeting or two ago, and so now we're talking at $5.5 million. So a much smaller amount, and so I want to. These are all goals that we want to pursue. But if we are looking at this through a lens of economic development, I would, in my view, given some of the other priorities that we've talked about tonight, I don't see child care support and affordable housing coming out of this smaller bucket of money.
Can I respond to that? Because you're right. When I love having you on this committee, and I told you that before, because you remember these things and you hold us accountable. I think I may have even said maybe we'll be up to 20, right? I was really excited about it. But I was realistic. I think I said somewhere between 5 and 10, and I was hoping for 10. We're in that range. How I would like to think about this, and I appreciate you bringing us in on that, and this is the way I want to kind of mark this up. We are highlighting the fact that these are kind of cross, whatever the fertilizing or child care support, affordable housing.
They're interlocked.
They're interlocked. So maybe what comes out of this conversation is, yeah, these are important economic development initiatives, but we're hoping that they're funded because they're catalytic and they cross several, because they're interlocked, maybe we can use a different bucket for those. I think the child care support, that's going to be picked up in social services. And it feels like that. I could be wrong. But this helps me with my planning. We can in some way mark it off for the ARPA conversation. This is exactly what I want to happen, but I also want to make sure that we're including it in future conversations about economic development planning. So not ARPA, but economic development.
I also.
Can I say something?
Sure. I also wanted to point to the chair that Ms. Wilson has her hand up, and I'm going to guess she wants to talk about workforce, but I'll let the chair decide.
Okay, yes. I wasn't looking for hands, but yes. Ms. Wilson, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, excuse my camera tonight, it's not functioning. But I did want to mention all of these are great ideas, and I'm, obviously a fan of Evanston because I feel like it belongs to me. So, listening to these things are awesome, and I would like to see it. Especially, I want to bring focus to the AUX, which is going to be at 2223 on Washington, which is right off Pittner Alley. But I want to mention how the AUX, which will be, the home to 8 to 10 Black-owned businesses that will spark economic development and create jobs. And this will include workforce development with Sunshine Enterprises that are there. Many of us are graduates of Sunshine Enterprises. It'll be vibrant spaces, including co-working spaces, and it will unlock economic opportunity. And I know we talk a lot about affordable housing in Evanston, which is super important, but we also have to tie that into sustainability for people and themselves, to give them local jobs instead of driving to Glenview, driving to Skokie, where they can work home and be close to home and be a part of the community. Because right now there's no definition for affordable, so we also have to include why there is no definition, but give people the opportunity to sustain themselves no matter what rent costs. We have to be able to bring our jobs back home, especially for the Black community. We talk a lot about equity, but it's time for us to focus on things like the AUX, as well as downtown, as well as Maine, as well as Dempster. I think this opportunity with the AUX is probably a hot topic before seeing something great so we can show the rest of the world how to do it.
Thank you, thank you. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, I wanted to also just make the point that the numbers, the allocation numbers that Paul shared with us are not final. And there was some discussion at council on Monday that indicates to me that some adjustment is in order, and the economic development bucket may very well be bigger than originally drafted. And if we can make that case, that will help. We can help make that case.
And I do think that, as we were talking about, these things are overlapping and interlocking. So, it might be, a project has all of these elements in it that, right, as a child, in terms of what we do for workforce development, for instance, like there's an aspect of that there's a childcare part of that, because how can people come unless they have childcare they can rely on? And so it's this overlap, but I get your point. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Ms. Payton, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so, of course, back to affordable housing. So I see that it says Emerson Square Phase 2 and 3. I do not feel that, of course, I'm just my opinion, but this person, Brent Shore, who is currently managing many properties here in Evanston, including Emerson Square, should not get another $18.1 million. Some people may not know about Brent Shore and their bonanza when the city received the $18.1 million. And if I'm correct, in 2025, this is allowed to go to market rate rents. But it seems that the city likes to continue to help the same people again. So 18.1 million bonanza plus the current management for many years since receiving that money. It seems like you need to spread the money around. Also about ADU construction grants. In 1930 Jackson, you gave Koenig $190,000 plus $35,000 more dollars to construct one ADU unit at 60% AMI or better. That's one unit over a garage. Here, I trying to provide up to 10 units of affordable housing, and some of them large, as you know, I've repeated many times. Families of 9, large families. A lot of these developments that you're talking about are not affordable. I take 30% AMI. You do not have places for families. It's just, affordable housing is like dirty words right now, because you're not, all these luxury buildings are containing 1 bedroom or studio units. Where do you have a lot of the money that you grant to the agencies? Those families are being shipped out to Arlington Heights, Schaumburg, Des Plaines, because you do not have the larger units, or you do not work with some of the agencies, may not look to people like me. But if you do not help people like me who provide the larger units, then a larger company, this is what's going to happen, I promise you, I'm telling you the truth here. Larger developers or larger property owners will come and buy units from people like me and turn them into luxury housing. So then your affordable housing stock is even smaller. So it seems like instead of keep on giving the same people money, like Mr. Koenig, who has many properties here in Evanston, who we've helped numerous times, and is trying to do a potential development at Church and Darrell, and Emerson Square, who you have given $18.1 million in the past, and he is still making money currently, and other developers like this. You need to be fair and equitable and help the small Black landlord, because many of these people are white, just to point out, and you're not helping the small landlord. Also, I just real quickly have a comment about the money in Old Orchard. So, Old Orchard has free parking. They also have parking for handicap. Many times, the city ignores handicap. I am handicapped myself, and 2 of my other family members are handicapped. Very seldom do we try to patronize business in Evanston because we cannot find a parking for handicapped people. It does not make sense. So when you go to the mall, you can find a handicap parking right there in the front. Also, need to focus on not luxury housing, but business. Old Orchard has a lot of business. They have a movie theater that's open. I have proposed other businesses, entertainment attractions, to have people come to Evanston. And also, shortly I will finish, I had mentioned at a meeting with Ms. Coakley one time before, Evanston likes to focus on other people besides Evanston residents. Why are the business just saying, oh, you can have 10% off if you show your Northwestern Wildcat card? Why not have a day or two for Evanston residents? If you show your Evanston ID, and you can get a discount today. It could be every Tuesday, downtown Evanston or something. Many times, while the students are here, the Evanston residents are ignored. Right now, a lot of students are home, so then you're waving a flag, oh, come on down and visit my business. So I just want to say that this is very important, that you're forgetting the Evanston residents are important in your plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Those were some very important points that you made, and I like that last idea. So, pardon?
Sorry.
Oh, Councilmember Burns, did you have your hand up? You're on mute, Bobby.
Paul, if you're not finished, I'll speak after you get done, just so we can move things along.
Thank
Did
you.
you have more? Yep.
Yeah, go, Paul, did you want to keep talking? I didn't mean it that way. Oh.
Well, we are committed to being done in 15 minutes. I'd love to meet that commitment. But I do think much of this is constructive. Can you all, Councilmember Burns, can you see the spreadsheet still? Is it still up?
Yes.
Thank you. We're talking about the business incubator. We shifted into workforce development. Again, this might be one of those topics that that blends in with the others that Member Deegan brought up. Office space modernization was something we talked about early on, really immediately post-pandemic. I mean, we're not post-pandemic anything yet, right? In fact, let's not go there, but the point is, our thought was, could we use some funding to help offices retrofit to have touchless elevators and broader spaces between cubicles and things like that. I think when we tested that early, it was kind of popular amongst the brokers. I'm not so sure, and Annie, correct me if I'm wrong, if that was something that they were really asking for now. They seem to be really focused on improving our environment downtown more than anything. Do you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think they've all, a lot of them have already, put in that infrastructure
Yes.
for
On their own.
cleaner buildings.
So we didn't know, but I would say that this would probably fall off the list. Retail storefront modernization, this is a program we've always had. We can use general fund money to kind of refund that program or maybe do some contribution. At the time, I had been talking with a food co-op, I think it was called Wild Onion. We're still actively looking for a space. But again, this could be the type of thing that we support. This idea of vanilla box, it's about taking vacant spaces and turning them into usable turnkey spaces. Again, this item came up during a time when we just didn't know how bad it was going to be. Hospitality recovery, I think we're starting to address a little bit of this with this program we announced earlier with the construction impacts on some of these businesses on Howard Street. I specifically mentioned Palm House here. These hospitality businesses attract a lot of visitors. We spend a lot of money. So I think we should really, or I would recommend, doesn't matter what I think, but I would recommend that we consider thinking of ways to help improve some of these businesses. We received a request from Firehouse, for example, who would like an investment of ARPA to help with have a retractable outdoor a roof to cover their outdoor patio. That would extend the season and generate more sales tax. I know Good to Go on Howard Street has some ideas about their facade, so I'd like to at least keep this as an open item, very traditional economic development. This is an early idea that I'd like to kind of not focus on because our funding is it's just not going to be deep enough. But there is a thought, and I think we could bake this into future planning. But we have a lot of old building stock here, and they're not landmarks, but they're definitely heritage buildings that we want to save. Maybe they have certain cornices, or they're made of land and stone. I don't think we have any land and stone buildings, but terracotta, or something that's just really adds character to the community. Could we come up with a district? My thought was maybe we add an additional incentive for facade improvements for these types of buildings. I think we should focus on planning that for future kinds of funding sources. City loan forgiveness. This is starting to get into nitty gritty. There are a number of fees. I talked about those earlier. Maybe there's a round that we can waive. But again, not so sure that really moves the needle. There were some loans that were provided through the LEND program. Again, probably not worth mentioning for the bigger picture. Now we start getting into some of the bigger things, business district infrastructure. How do we upgrade our parking system? Maybe we go to a pilot program where we're offering free parking, talking about Ms. Payton's idea. We can never have 100% free parking in Evanston. It's a classic tragedy of the commons situation where people will use it to their own personal benefit all the time. And I'm talking about downtown condo dwellers. If you're online right now listening, please use your garages. It's very helpful. We need to leave those spaces open for our businesses. Here we go. Mayor Biss mentioned the one-way street conversions. I think that's the kind of thing that we should be talking about with ARPA. That's an investment that changes the way the community functions and looks for the next 50 years.
I would say one-way street conversion to zero-way street conversion as well. Interesting. Streets that make pedestrians.
Could not agree more.
Well, is that?
You gotta be careful about that, because that was a 70s idea too.
Look at
this
State
here?
Street.
Yeah, that was
State Street downtown, close to a pedestrian way. I think we'd have to give some careful analysis to that before we do it. I love the idea, but I think.
Yeah. If you look at the history of that, it killed State Street for a long time, and a number of other cities did it too.
Which I was also doing it now.
Yeah, they're doing Sundays on State.
Right, right, so I think having it come and go, rather than, because what happened was it moved.
I would just
No,
let's put it on the table for
Yeah,
discussion.
So I'm gonna document that as like targeted, because we talked about it earlier, we talked about Custer.
Right.
Yeah, like that would be a perfect example, like if the farmer's market were down there, then to close off those streets, so it becomes a pedestrian.
Yeah.
For a defined period of time, and
Yeah.
then it's back to open up again, right?
Did you call that zero?
I just said zero way.
It was, I loved it. It was
We were gonna coin that.
it was a real mathematician move.
Yeah.
www.copyright.com.
Yeah. Well, you have Custer out.
Paul, can you summarize what was just said? Because I missed all of that. I can't really hear that well.
So the council member Newsma suggested that we consider closing streets or using he labeled them zero-way streets instead of one or two-way, called them zero-way. And then other members of the committee suggested that we do this on a targeted basis. There are examples around the country, in the United States at least, where when you close down streets permanently, it really does destroy commerce. But there are some successful examples. I think they do it don't they do it in Madison?
Charlottesville.
Kalamazoo actually somehow had a successful one.
Boulder's got a really beautiful street.
But they don't work everywhere.
There's an article in like the Times or the Post or something about the way they do it in Cambridge, Massachusetts recently on Memorial Drive.
All big universities.
Right, exactly.
There's a lot of people without cars.
So this really feeds into what we're talking about. These are the big infrastructure. Again, you could also use infrastructure money for this. Parking lots. Alderman Nguyen knows how much I love. She's laughing over my shoulder here. But we have one lot lot 1 at South and Hinman that we received 7 proposals to redevelop as affordable housing. We haven't seen them yet.
Right. Well, you and I are
mentioned
agreeing
it.
on that one.
Okay. But the next few weeks we're going to be analyzing those and determining it. But there are a number of others around, especially in Southeast Evanston where I live, where they're right next to the business districts and right next to apartments and condominiums. And I think there's a number of ways we could use them better, which is not eliminating parking because people need to drive. That's human nature. It's it's an American way of life. Until that changes, we need to provide a space for it. Some would argue that we just have to make it easier to not take cars, but I'm trying to be pragmatic, realistic. So let's do something different. Let's build affordable housing over parking. Let's convert a lot or all or some of them into EV charging stations so condo and apartment dwellers can buy electric vehicles and have a place to charge them, which helps reduce carbon, which links to climate action resilience and so on and so forth. I really think these are, and again, there's a job training opportunity here to get people working to figure out how to install these EV stations. The point, we could do better than surface parking lots.
I see Arrington Blue Building.
Where do you see that?
Under Parks.
Member Deacon is skipping right over all the consulting services that we need, I think, to move this forward. Again, all of these apply a number of 150, 50 to 150,000 for these studies. I mean, that's just what it's going to cost. It doesn't all have to be ARPA. It can be some of it, and then we use other funding for consulting services. I wanted to point out a couple of kind of pet projects that I imagine. We have to come up with a new way to engage as a community, and that fits into branding. I think Ms. Gallagher brought that up earlier. I think we just need to, who are we? And I think if you ask, I think a lot of Evanstonians have different ideas of what our community is. I really think it's time to help fund the build out the kitchen at Arrington Lagoon. It's a $50,000 build out, some tree lighting, cafe tables and chairs. The city council has already been talking about food carts and other ways to use it. We'll get to the point of how we're going to use the lakefront. And the Lagoon building has an opportunity, there's a patio, it could be a really quiet place to enjoy a glass of wine or coffee and not turn it into something that it's, I don't know, I have a
You still gotta deliver the food, pick up the garbage, pick up the grease barrel, cook the food. You gotta
There-
walk around the back
there
of
will be
every
no
nice
cooking.
restaurant and see what's around the back.
Yeah, there will be no cooking in this kitchen because it's tiny. It's a warm-up kitchen.
Okay,
But
all right.
it's an early phase idea.
I have an open mind, can you tell?
Do you want me to answer that?
No.
All right. I am highlighting climate action resilience planning. I am.
What is freshwater job training? I mean, in terms of maintaining the quality of the air, the water quality of the lake?
This was the idea of how do we maintain the water quality, but how is it used in research? How is it? What are we going to do in the world of climate? Global warming. I can't think of the word right now.
Climate change?
Climate change.
Right.
Right. So, are we going to be a place that people flock to get fresh water in 20 years? I hope not. I hope that we're not that desperate, that humans are that desperate that happens.
We have,
But it
well,
does.
climate refugees are all moving all over the
Yeah.
world right now.
So, this is a brainstorm, and is there a way to use it to create research and jobs from that? I don't know. All of these other things are pretty much standard language, energy retrofits and matching programs, training programs. All right, we're going to have to hurry up here. CTA Purple Line Express, get that thing going longer. That's Ms. Copley's favorite project. How do we fix up the bridges and viaducts? I think we have.
Yes.
That's happening. We don't necessarily have to use ARPA.
No, we should have the.
I have had conversations
They
about.
cost so much. We gotta make CTA then.
Right, so
RTA pay for those.
Councilmember Nguyen is saying that we have to make sure that CTA and RTA
Get some of that federal infrastructure money.
Right,
use,
yes,
that they pay their fair share and also use federal infrastructure money for that.
That's it, exactly. That's what you need.
Just a few more topics. Earlier, I think Newsma mentioned arts, the arts destination. North Lake does have a request into the city for an investment. I'm sure we're going to scale it down. I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to discuss how much it is. I don't even know if it's, but they have requested.
Requested $2 million. That's
Okay,
public.
okay, so it's, I couldn't remember. It's a $2 million request. Based on where we are in terms of allocating funding, I don't see that coming from ARPA entirely. And I might be stating the obvious. And there's some other things we could support, public art. We've been talking for years about how do we be more welcoming to our Asian student population and kind of our small, call it a Chinatown at Davis and Chicago, with a lot of the restaurants. And I think there's a way we can do that. It could be fun. And then a laundry list of merchant district support. The CARA initiative, these were some real tactical solutions. Bulk purchase of our gift card to get money flowing into our local businesses, food carts, all the things that we've been talking about for years. Now is the time, because we have the money, to invest in these things. Branded bike racks, to see Evanston on them. I may have seen one in Wilmette that said Wilmette on it, just telling the truth.
Yeah, one in Wilmette that says Evanston.
That would be a fun thing to do, like kind of a high school prank. But again, I feel like I'm short selling or giving it shortchanging this merchant district support. This is critical. This is what we really led off tonight's conversation with. All right. If we can stay until 8:20, because I want to show.
No, Paul, let's stay till 8:30. How about that?
So we're going to go until 8:30.
That's a hard stop.
I don't feel like I want to make sure I'm checking in with Chairwoman Nguyen about calling out people, but I know Councilmember Burns said he wanted to say something when I was done, and I am.
Councilmember Burns, would you like to go right ahead now?
Okay.
Or wait, Paul, are you done?
I'm done speaking about the list, yes.
Yes,
I have one more
okay.
thing to talk about.
Councilmember Burns, did you want to ask your questions or make comments?
And again, I'm okay waiting for the end, and if we're gonna see this, if this is gonna circle back around, and I'm fine.
Okay.
Speaking with Paul in between meetings as well.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Did you want to say something about the list?
At some point, I want to just give
Go
a,
right ahead.
I wanted to follow up on something that I alluded to earlier, because I do think it's just interesting information. Paul and I have talked with a lot of the downtown building owners and people who are doing this work in downtown Chicago and so forth, and I just have a few observations that I found really helpful when I think about this.
Go ahead.
First of all, it's not totally clear why, but we are behind Chicago. So Chicago has seen, since May, a steady uptick in their downtown office census, and we've been pretty flat. And as we've been in communication with our bigger downtown employers, and they've indicated, yeah, we're sort of looking at Labor Day. We haven't heard any backsliding on that commitment as the Delta variant's gotten worse, but that's something to watch for closely. It seems clear that a lot of the downtown tenants are downsizing their commitment. So they're going to be having some of their employees work remotely permanently, and so there's going to be a need for more tenants coming in, and it does seem like there's a real opportunity, as the exact same thing is happening in Chicago, for us to be the beneficiary of that. I mean, an example that came to my mind is how many Evanston and Wilmette, Winnetka, Highland Park, Glencoe residents does the typical big downtown law firm have as partners who would love to go downtown one day a week now and come to the Evanston satellite office relatively regularly. There's a lot of opportunities like this, and I think it's beneficial right now for us to be thinking about how to capitalize on that. I think Annie's observation about the value of a certain amount of, hopefully modest, but real expenditure on some marketing and branding, I think could be of value. But the other thing that was interesting in talking to these folks who are trying to lease out this space is, I'm used to talking to businessmen who want to harangue me about taxes and regulations, and I'm used to sort of that's a certain type of conversation. And they sort of given up on that, and they were really talking about other things that were much more aligned with this list. And they talked about the built environment a lot. There was a lot of concern about the viaducts. There was concern about, literally what do you see when you get off the purple line in the Metro at Davis? They're talking about trying to persuade a downtown firm to persuade, Lakeview residents to get on the train and go north and not get on the train and go south. And what they see when they got off the train matters, and what they see when they got off the train now does not look so great. And so these investments that I thought were perhaps nice to haves and just kind of spiffing up the way the bridges and roads and train stations look downtown was really high on their list as we think about what it's going to take to attract new tenants in. So I just wanted the committee to be aware of that as y'all are doing your prioritization.
No, I think that probably plays into the people coming into town too. I think that's, it's a good point.
If we're going to make the most out of Northlake being here, we have to. The city has to do our part to have a welcoming, a welcoming presence to folks getting off public transportation and making their way to the field.
Right. So do you have in your discussions, do you have an understanding about why and what businesses are pulling people back into the loop and how they are different from the businesses that we might have here? Because that's what is it about the large employers or however many employers are in the loop that's getting people to return that's different about our assortment of employers?
The answer that we got that was perhaps a little bit self-interested, because it was given by someone who's involved in this work, was that Chicago was really intentional and aggressive way before we thought about it. So, 8 months ago, 10 months ago, they were working with their large employers and putting together return plans so that as the employee population started getting more vaccinated, they communicated already with their employees, they had safety plans, and they were just sort of ready to go. So that may be a piece of it. I think also look, all this stuff it feeds on itself, right? The benefit of being downtown is partially that other workers in similar fields are there, and there's cross-pollination, and so it doesn't take that high percentage of Chicago to get to a critical mass where it starts to be valuable to be back.
Right.
Whereas we're sort of almost never there.
And I can just add, so working for World Business Chicago, I've been a part of those efforts and those conversations, and I think you have organizations like BOLMA, the Building Owners and Managers Association, that have been very active in working with their building owners, those large tenants, to be very aggressive in talking about the benefits of being back downtown and the safety of being so. And you get into that built environment and you feel good, right? You get off the train and you see some of that vitality. And right now, our downtown, I would argue, is lacking that. So there's less of a reason to come into the office because, there's just, we don't have that vitality right now.
Right. And you're right about the critical mass, because a lot of the businesses and restaurants that served the office workers are gone now in our downtown. So there is that sense of, when you come back, the favorite place you wanted to go to lunch is no longer there. So, but we have to figure out how to pull people back. Yeah, that would be interesting to understand more of how Chicago's done it and what we could do, because we should be able to do it. We're on so much smaller scale.
We are working directly with the larger employers. Rotary's planning on being pretty close to entirely back as of early September.
That would be huge.
And ZNS, which is also not a small number of people, is coming back. I think Magnetar also, if I recall correctly. They're working with us. They're sharing their plans. There's a shared understanding of the value of this, but and I do think the other point about critical mass is, timing it to match up with when Northwestern students are back in town. From a look and feel, like, oh, hey, there's vibrancy on the street, probably makes some sense to the employers.
Right, and so Northwestern, I think they start September 20th or 21st this year. So, yeah, and that would be great to have the POW, have someone. So it's the idea of like, let's see if we can get them all back around the same time. Like the same week or two, so there is this, or whatever, so they recognize they're not the only ones. Yeah.
Do you have a ton, this is so big, have you thought about like what's first, what needs to happen first in order to get it kind of down the funnel? And do we need to form committees, like, what do you need?
Well, I appreciate you thinking that I have the capacity to really figure out a way to address this. I mean, this is, so for those who are on the call, I'm not sure if you heard Ms. Gallagher's question, but it was a thoughtful one, which is, have we thought about what comes first? How do we prioritize? What do we do to get this started? Do we need to form subcommittees? And I don't know if that's the answer. I don't know. I feel like what we're hearing, the mayor and I participated as a staff member, but there's an independent CEO organization that has invited the heads of these larger organizations to talk about this stuff, similar to what would be happening in Chicago. They're talking about, we think we're coming back Labor Day, right? After Labor Day. If that happens, I don't feel as much of a sense of urgency about what do we do for all of our businesses, because that will solve the problem. Because if they're required to come back to work, then they go out to lunch and they shop and they do things. But if we're going to be in a permanent hybrid model, if we start hearing that, if the variant takes off and God forbid we have to do all this stuff again, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to be honest with you. So we're getting that feedback from the CEO group, which is the larger groups. And I think that's the critical piece. One of the first things, I promise you I'm almost done. One of the first things one of these CEOs said, the reason he wanted to form this group is because he walked around and saw the stores were vacant. And we asked him, it's like, how are we gonna fix this? And we asked him in a roundabout way, one of the ways you do it is you bring your company back to work. Because it's, those are the people.
And what did he say?
Right, I prefer not to respond because it will kind of reveal, but, and in due time he will, right? That was kind of the response. But what we learned, especially about our downtown, and Councilmember Winnie mentioned that maybe Maine and Central didn't do as poorly because they had that daytime population of residents.
Right.
And they're not dependent on that daytime population. That's huge here. That's 30,000 people that were literally gone.
Yeah.
They were gone. So September, if we see the workers back and see people on the streets, it'll be harder to park. And there isn't as much that we need to do on an emergent basis. We can get into that planning mode where we start doing the things, placemaking and investing in that infrastructure.
Paul, what's the timing of Fountain Square? Like, when does the water get turned back on? I know it's broken, like I've read that, but like, what's the timing for the fix?
I don't think we know.
I read it was.
Annie, do you have specific information on that from your engineers that isn't going to be scandalous?
I'm gonna not talk about it.
Okay. Well, we know it's going to be a while.
Because to me, that was a win. That's an example of placemaking, right? Like, that was an example of the city trying to be creative, having a central draw. We're talking about building a farmer's market around it. And now when you walk through there, it's just another, it just sort of adds to that feeling of the downtown feels desolate, it feels disregarded, it feels empty. And so if we're trying to bring people back in September, come back, be back,
Right.
and that still is dry, that's
It
a
will
bummer.
be dry. It'll be dry for a while. Annie does.
I today confirmed, hopefully confirmed, I don't want it to be in Evanston now by tomorrow. I believe I might have some funding to do some placemaking. I have ideas around this. I've been working on it for 2 days at least. Only 2 days, but it's a pretty good plan, and I think I have funding. And if I don't, I'm gonna figure something out, but yes, there is a placemaking idea brewing, and I think there's funding that I've identified for it. But I also wanted to talk about, we are doing events out there, Thursday night markets, we have 3 left. We are supporting our creatives and our makers at these events. We just got permission to have beer out there at our next one. We have music, and I'm working with some of our property managers to host a series of welcome back events to kind of just give a nice vibe for when our daytime population returns. And we desperately come back.
Right. So I will point out that Annie's funding is private. And I hope it's private fund. Yeah, it's from a private source. It's not public money. So, and we'll give you all the due credit for that because if it works out, it's a very slick idea. And thank you for not having to rely on public money for it. All right, can I shift gears really quick?
Yeah.
Because we really want to talk about, and I think this might be pretty obvious, but I would like to get some buy-in from the committee, and then we'll go to Burns, if you don't mind, to have him ask whatever questions he had. But this spreadsheet, it's very simple. This would be a form that we use to evaluate projects, right? And the things that I would like to see, again, I don't want to get too bureaucratic. It's a simple web-based form. Name, address, give us a simple narrative. What kind of business is it? That way we can collect data and do reporting on it. Give us your total project cost. Show us how much ARPA you would need so we can compare how much we're investing as a percentage of total project, how much equity and other public sources and other sources. What's your full-time employee count? What's your part-time employee count? That way we understand what the current baseline is. Once you get the investment, what's your projected full-time employees, your projected part-time employees, so we can get that that ROI jobs, return on investment, pre and post sales tax, pre and post liquor tax, pre and post property tax. So we can have all these estimates to get at, I think, a lot of the numbers that I know that Councilmember Reed craves and Mr. Burns asks a lot, or Councilmember Burns. Are we retaining an existing business? I think we should put more value on retaining an existing business than like if we're going to score these, let's give a retention score that's higher than, or an expanding score that's higher than attracting a new business. We want to help our businesses stay and grow here. Clearly, I have to work on my climate action vocabulary and vernacular, but what are the things that we want to include in an analysis and how it impacts climate resilience, the action plan? Again, I'm showing my weakness in vernacular, but equity standards, what kinds of things we want to see. And then this, again, we're showing the economic impact when we demonstrate all these returns. And then, again, is it a one-time expenditure or is it an investment? And you make those scores, you add up all of the results in some way, and then you have a scoring system in place for equity, CARP, and other impacts that we want to study. Am I on the right path with this kind of matrix? And are there obvious things I'm missing, or the things that are redundant that I should remove? How would you like to approach this part of the conversation?
I think you're on the right path. I'll just jump in and say, I think we have to give people some parameters, applicants some parameters, so that before they invest in answering all these questions, we need to at least signal, like, what is it that we would generally look at that would have a more favorable reception than something that we're going to give a flat no. So we have to figure out how do you let people know, what are we looking for? And so you might have to have a lot more definition in there in terms of what are we looking for, and because you don't want people, and also what is reasonable for an ask. What we're not, and then we have to determine what's reasonable for ask. Someone coming in and asking for $100,000, well, what would make that worthwhile? Is that even something that we would entertain versus someone asking for $15,000? What are we going to have a cap? Because we should have one. And then what are the criteria for that?
What about the idea of community benefit? I'm not sure I saw anything in there, Paul. And I'm trying to, for opportunities that there might not be a huge job creation, for example, but I would go back to the Arrington Lagoon, and activating that space in that building. To me, that has a huge community benefit that might not generate a large number of jobs, but getting at some of those intangibles that I think go to creating that sense of place that we keep.
Kind of halo effect. What's the halo effect?
Yeah, thank you.
This business coming in, their customers, they know their customers come in, and they will then spend time doing other things while they're there.
Is it that kind of thing, or is it if we're going to invest this amount of money in your business, we're expecting that you would do something in return? When I think of community benefits.
Yeah, no, I don't. Community benefits not in the traditional, like I'm talking to a developer and he's stating the community benefits.
I just want to clarify.
More to the point of what Alderman Councilwoman is saying.
The softer kind of.
Well, but if you can say this is, sometimes you can. There are a lot of times we can quantify the halo effects. People who come to the theater will spend $65 on a meal, but so if there's something else like that, if you start a class for children, their parents are trapped there, so they will go and then look around nearby and spend money.
But if an individual restaurant, for example, wants to, add to their outdoor dining experience, I will tell you that I feel like other communities are just sort of doing it so much better on the outdoor dining experience. And so that business may not be able to point to a specific numbers that would compete against some of these other things, but in my view, do a lot to sort of add to the overall
Placemaking.
and the halo effect, if you, I'm not exactly sure, Paul, how we sort of capture that, but that's sort of the idea that I'm trying to get
So
to.
I think, and by the way, I want you to know I'm taking notes. I'm not,
Okay, you're not checking the scores?
You're not chatting with your mom?
I'm not sports gambling. I think you just said what it is. It's like it's some kind of placemaking measure, right? Like how do we?
Right.
We'll have to see if there's any models out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to underscore all this. I really, really appreciate the way the chair said it. And this is in a way what I was thinking when you asked your question earlier about how we sequence this. And frankly, it's why I'm here tonight. I said something very similar at council on Monday evening as well. Like, this is great. This is a good beginning of the template, and like working out the score is going to be a useful exercise. But I don't think we want to just be passive consumers of proposals coming from the outside. I think we want absolute clarity about our priorities, our sense of what is most important, our sense of what we're prepared to initiate ourselves if we don't get a suitable proposal from an external partner. And I guess I'm here tonight to beg this committee to do that work. Because I think this bucket of ARPA money is unlike the others. I mean, obviously our vision as a city matters everywhere, but we know that when it comes to the social service funding, we do almost none of that in-house. The partners are there, they're gonna come to us with good proposals, and we're gonna need a grid like this to evaluate these proposals, and that's gonna sort of be the beginning and the end of the story. I think with this is different. We need a strategy and clarity on what our own priorities are, and I think Paul is setting us up really well to devise that, but we haven't actually done that work. And I think that's to me what will set ourselves up to actually then allocate the money properly.
Yeah.
And I was also piggybacking on that is the idea that realizing that we don't necessarily want to spend all this economic development money on these grants or on these applications. I mean,
it's not a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of money, but look at what you spent at Fountain Square.
We're at $6 million.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, but also looking at the planning, because no one else is going to do that. The consultant for the downtown planning or how you reconfigure our streets if we want to do that. The sort of the things that only we can do, and then so we want to leave a portion of that. Some of this recognize that there are some things that we are going to be the signing the check for. I mean, it's not necessarily,
It's not an app.
I'm getting tired. Right, but it's the idea that the comprehensive stuff that we have to direct, as opposed to people coming in and saying how they want to use the money.
Exactly.
It's not just a reactive procedure,
exactly.
we've got to be proactive.
Yeah.
So we have to value figuring out, okay, where is the investment? Where is the best bang for the dollar? And that's hard.
And are we qualified to make that, right? I think that's where you bring the consultant in.
Yeah, yes. Consultants cost us so much money. And that's why we hear so much up in Evanston, consultants cost money. Right, but you're right, though, if it helps us spend our money best, but we have to figure that out. What are other communities doing?
Well, the theme that I'm seeing as staff is, I've said it already, there is definitely a strong current of placemaking and the word cleanup is a strong word, and there is an element of that, but it's really about the placemaking and what we're about. And we heard it from the people we spoke with, on the broker side, the property owners, and hearing it today. I've heard it in different ways from each of you. I think Councilmember Burns is ready.
Yes, Councilmember Burns.
I just wanted to speak to this. So I want to agree with what's been said in the last few minutes, but I'm back into it this way. So, I think one of the maybe easiest things to determine right now is how much direct merchant support that we're willing to do with the economic development money. I think that's the cleanest thing that we can start off with, to just say, look, what is that dollar amount? Because that if we're going to do some direct merchant support, then it makes sense to have the merchants come to us and tell us what they need to make them whole or to support them. And then that scoring system, Paul, that you went over, makes total sense if we're going to do direct merchant support. So I think the first question, if I was leading this, right, doing consulting work would be that, like how far are we willing to go? Is it $1 million? Is it $500,000? What is that dollar amount? And then there's everything else. I think if we take an approach that we want to be a little more proactive and lead and create goals and strategy on how the money will be used, then we'll talk about how much goes towards planning, placemaking, and some of these other things that I've heard today, especially workforce development. We may not get applications for this, but it's important. We as a city understand it's important. We need to prioritize it. It's what we heard during campaigns. It's what the returning people have heard, council members have heard, and numerous ward meetings and town halls, and like we've gotten feedback over the years about action that we need to take. And so, just because we don't get an application doesn't mean that we shouldn't move in that direction. So, but I think if we're looking to take action right now, I think the best thing we can do is really come up with a dollar amount for direct merchant support. And a question I would have goes back to what Councilmember Braithwaite said, which is what other support is out there, right? Is there any support in Cook County government? Is there any support from the state? And even if there is, do we want to wait on that? Or do we want to say, no, we're going to set aside this amount of money for direct merchant support? But again, personally, that's the only thing that I feel comfortable with at this point, using the scoring system for, because that's the only thing that makes sense to me is when merchants are going to come before us and say, yeah, this is how we like to use our funds. It makes total sense to do a scoring system. Everything else, to be frank, I don't think we're ready to make those type of decisions. Thank you.
I think you're right, Bob, yeah. Okay, so I think this has been a wonderful discussion. You know, we've really covered a lot of ground. How soon can we meet again and work some more?
Yeah.
And Paul, have you cloned yourself so that, you know?
Thank you, Beth. Thank you. Well, yeah, I appreciate that sentiment. So we, as in all seriousness, we currently have one staff person who's on maternity leave, and we lost our other staff person to World Business Chicago. Congratulations to them, because she was a wonderful staff person. So we are hiring somebody, and
do you want to swap us somebody for Pauline?
We're all one region.
So we have we're going to have a slightly larger staff coming up soon. In addition, we have our special service area and our merchant group partners that'll help. This committee is very helpful. There are business members of the community that have given some significant input tonight. That's really helpful. So I don't feel alone at all, except when I come to this building during the day, because it's very quiet and I'm alone in my office. But there's a strong community here that's wanting to work on this. So I think from the legislative process of Evanston, this committee doesn't meet in August. In fact, the council meets once, as far as I know. So I'm not ever going to recommend that everybody get together in August. It's really hard to do. We'll be back together in September as a group. But in the meantime, I think we just continue to do the work and come back with a really strong plan.
I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I think we should meet in August. Okay. I'm sorry, Jonathan. Right. I know. I mean, we all have plans, but I'm just concerned that.
Yeah.
No, I think we need to be moving with a sense of urgency, and I think if we can make that work, I think that's appropriate.
Because what?
Fourth Wednesday in August is the first day of school.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. That's not probably ideal. But
I'll be in town.
yeah, well, I know. Well, the first day of school is the
25th. Is
right.
the fourth.
And actually, the high school is starting on, I think, the 16th. Yeah. So
I was like I said, I'm happy to meet too. I think we need to get some stuff in motion.
yeah. So
And actually, it's on my calendar.
Right. So, council members Burns and Reed, we're talking about going ahead and scheduling a meeting in August. Traditionally, or in the past, because of people's vacations, the EDC has not met, but I think that we should meet in August, because there's so much to do. We can't wait till September.
I agree. Yes, I also agree. I think we definitely should meet in August, given the time frame.
Yeah.
And just noting that there's 5 Wednesdays in September, we could potentially meet September 1st and then September 29th. So we're not waiting till the end of September if there's, conflicts around school schedules, just when you guys.
Well, I mean, I think it, for those of, I don't have school kids anymore, but you're our representative sample. So, you're gonna be in town, but.
I'll be here. I'm willing to meet.
So I think it's okay. I mean, we might, maybe not have as many members of the public, but I think we should be that.
Can we put a poll out just to find out when we could get quorum on a couple different dates in August?
So what would happen is, if September 1st is the preferred date, then the question is, do we meet on the 29th instead of the 22nd to give?
Yeah, I would say so.
So I'll send that poll out.
Did you say meet on
The meeting on the
September
29th.
1st instead of August 25th.
Yeah, and part of this, I guess, Paul, is for you to provide guidance in terms of how much time you need so that we can actually get together and have it be a productive conversation.
Very good point, Lisa. Right.
Speaking of the children, how do we get going?
Okay, so why don't we put out a poll for either the Wednesday, the 25th, or September 1st, with an understanding that then we will be back for the regular meeting in September.
Do that.
Thank you. It was really great meeting you all.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and we're going to have Mr. Somerset poll us as to whether our next meeting will be at either the very end of August or the very first week in September. And I want to thank everyone for participating, and particularly thank our city staff for giving us a lot to chew on, a lot to work on. And welcome our new committee member as well. All right, we are adjourned.
Fantastic. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.